Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Barbara Pagano. In her late 50s, Barbara and her daughter Elizabeth set out for a 6-month sailing adventure on their 42-foot sailboat Revival. Together, they sailed alone for more than 2,000 miles. Neither woman was an experienced sailor. 2 weeks before departure, Barbara flunked out of navigation school. The test was difficult, and Elizabeth returned from Orlando with certification from a 1-week sailing school. Pushing a little boat through water was hard work, especially for two inexperienced sailors. Barbara learned how by doing it. 8 years later, that learn-by-doing approach yielded significant returns as Barbara faced the challenge of creating a post-retirement life. The transition should not have been so hard. Her story and motivation to help others inspired the launch of Your Extraordinary Life Retirement, yourextraordinarylifeinretirement.com. We will have those links in the show notes, folks. This gives post-50 individuals tools and strategies to design and live fulfilling lives in the last third of life. With graduate degrees in counseling and human behavior as a solid base, Barbara curates research and produces content on aging, retirement, unretirement, productive longevity, well-being, and happiness. With groundbreaking clarity and a refreshing, experienced voice, her second book, The 60-Something Crisis, How to Live an Extraordinary Life in Retirement, was released with high praise in July of 2022. An executive coach and seasoned speaker, Barbara has motivated thousands of senior leaders and middle managers to higher levels of performance in work and life. Her previous book, The Transparency Edge, How Credibility Can Make or Break You in Business, was chosen by Fast Company magazine as a book of the month. Written with her daughter Elizabeth, an award-winning business journalist, the book was translated into 4 languages, including Spanish and Chinese, and was among BookScan's list of the 50 best-selling new business books in America. It also hit number 7 on Barnes & Noble's list of best-selling business ethics books. A fierce advocate for the sabbatical movement, Barbara is co-founder of yoursabbatical.com, a research and strategy firm with tools and resources for assessing the value of existing or new sabbatical programs in corporations, and offers current trends and best practices in sabbatical initiatives. Yoursabbatical.com was a 2009 winner of the Moving into the Future Award, presented by the Conference Board. Barbara is a co-author of the ultimate toolkit for writing and presenting a killer sabbatical proposal your boss can't refuse, and the Comprehensive Sabbatical Program Toolkit, a how-to guide for implementing your company's sabbatical strategy. Articles by and about Barbara have been published in Fast Company, Investors Business Daily, Consulting to Management, Healthy Aging, The New York Times, and American Executive, among others. She is a highly rated speaker, past president of the Georgia Speakers Association, and previously named one of the top 3 speakers in Atlanta. Barbara's personal practice of designing 3-month solo work-life adventures in falling down colonial cities in Latin and South America is indicative of how the last third of life can combine freedom, work, and joy. She has lived and worked in Nicaragua, Chile, Ecuador, Argentina, Peru, and Mexico. Barbara is a crackerjack grandmother, takes tap dancing lessons, and cycles along the road overlooking sugar sand beaches. She divides her time between Pensacola and Nashville. Please join me in welcoming Barbara Pagano.
Oh,
Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you very much.
I do too. I am inspired and intrigued and so excited to have you on Work from the Inside Out, Barbara. The minute I even heard about you, I knew I had to have you here because there are so many aspects to the way that you have lived your life, the messages that you're sending, and the kinds of things you're doing now, and the way that you've even navigated over the years that I really want my audience to hear about. So, and I want to selfishly. So, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning and talk a little bit about your formative years and how they may or may not have informed where you are today. But take us back to some of those early years.
I also have to look at one person, and that would be my mom. I was the oldest of four, and this was a woman who looked at her life and said, I want it to be the best. And I can remember her, we lived in government housing, and I can remember her typing late at night, practicing her typing so that she could pass the typing test to get into government. So bottom line is, Daddy worked on the assembly line at Frigidaire, and Mom had a sterling career in the government, rising through the ranks. After she passed away, I discovered all these pictures of her, and there would be all these men and then my mom. She loved her work, got a housekeeper. We got out of government housing. But I suppose, Tammy, that all along the way, she was telling me verbally and showing me that I really could do anything that I wanted. All that I had to do was just take the resources that I had and go for it. So that was a very big influence. And when I look back and where I am now, that feeling of, well, Barbara, you've got everything that you need. You may have to go out and learn some things. That just got me going.
There's a certain message there about you have everything you need. You just need to use the resources that are available to you. And I think that's a bit of that feels like an inside out message to me. And that's different than telling someone you can be anything you want to be. That there's a bit of looking outside yourself to be something versus saying you already have what you need. Now you need to make sure you have the resources to help you get there. You know what I mean?
Well, you're connecting with so many places in my life where, I can remember attending seminars where, the Harvard professor would be would be teaching negotiation skills. And I wasn't there to learn negotiation skills. I was there to stack my skills up against a seminar leader of a high-ranking seminar leader. And I would walk out and say, well, I have this, this, and this, but I need this, this, and this. I need to learn how to tell a story better. I need to learn how to connect with my audience in different ways. So I would come out with what I had, and then whatever I needed to get, you learn it. You just go figure it out. And when you talk about the boat trip and two inexperienced sailors, that's exactly what we did. We just said to people, look, we know, and they said, you can't go. You can't go. You don't know what you're doing. And we just said, look, we're two very smart, competent women. We'll make the best decisions we can, and we'll do it. And if we can't do it, we'll be back soon. But it was figuring out as you go along. And that has served me very well. What do I have? What do I need? Where do I go to get what I need? Where do I go to learn what I need to learn? And that's how it happened.
And it sounds like that was also modeled for you too.
It was modeled for me. I can hear that typewriter at night I can conjure up that blah, 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 thing. Blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
she needed a certain score to get in the typing pool.
I remember that sound.
Yeah. And so,
that's great.
if there's anything I want your listeners to know, I think we do have it inside ourselves. Maybe not everything when we need, but and one of the things I learned very, very important that I would love people to know is that high desire will trump your skill level. If you really, really want something, and I really, really wanted to see if I could push that little boat through the water, and I really, really wanted to see if I could keynote a large audience, and I really, really wanted to see if I could publish a book at 77. If you really, really want it, then you don't have to already have the skills. You just go build on that skill level.
Yeah.
We were not, even at the end of 6 months, we were not perfect sailors.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and what's perfect anyway? It's in the eye of the beholder, right?
I could have learned the knots, Tammy. I never learned the knots. I could have, and I did flunk out of navigation school, and my daughter was just horrified. She said, and I said, look, the test was really hard. I think I know enough that we're going to be okay. So let's just, they put all these lights on it and it say, what kind of boat is that? I thought, well, I'll figure that out,
There
later.
You go. I love that. I love that. So clearly you grew up with some great role models. I mean, the word industrious just comes to mind, real can-do attitude and a real, set of standards for education and just believing in yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
a very strong work ethic. When Daddy worked on the assembly line, he didn't miss a day at work.
Really?
I mean, you just didn't miss a day at work. You had an obligation, you made a promise. And so the work ethic, along with this kind of can-do, figure it out, two very important things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so you went off to college.
I did go off to college, and at that particular time I came out being an elementary school teacher. I had the opportunity to teach high school, but I only stayed in that part of teaching for about 3 years, and then I went on to counseling. So I became a school counselor for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I loved the helping people be better at what they were striving to be better at, whether it was reading or math or whatever that was. But then a real turning point for me was when we had a very strong adult education program in the Atlanta county that I was in. And the director of that chased me down the hall and said, I just lost my assertiveness training teacher. Can you teach that for me? And I said, absolutely not. I mean, the thought of a room full of adults, I was mortified. But then I got to the end of the hallway, and here it comes again. You should do this. So I turned around, chased him down the hall, and said, I can do that. And now, not do it in a way that you walk into the classroom the next night, but the way to get prepared to understand adult learning a little bit differently than the education piece that I was comfortable in. And then that led to a Kennesaw College, which is now the Kennesaw University, who heard I was teaching a very successful class. And would you come over to the college and teach it? Okay. And then there were business people. I was teaching listening skills and negotiation skills and the kind of business skills that companies valued. And they went back to their businesses and said, we need to have this woman come in and teach us in our company. But you see, all along the way, it's still teaching. It's just, okay, what do I need to be able to be successful with adults? What do I need to be successful with these business people? And then from there, moved on to a coaching career. And that was with high-level senior executives that I just looked at as eighth graders. I just look, if I had a room of senior executives and they started acting out, which, okay, sometimes they do. If I could handle the eighth graders, I could handle the senior executives. So the teaching has always been there. And when I got stuck at 65 and really couldn't figure out exactly what I wanted to do, it all came back to me that this is my love. This is what I'm good at, helping be better than they are, giving them skills, teaching. Let me go do the research. Let me go figure it out. And then I'll combine it and put it in a way that makes sense to you in your environment, whether you're a senior leader or whether you're reading a book. So that's a kind of a nutshell of how that early education, and there was a master's degree, and then there was an education ES degree on top of that.
Right.
But it was always around education.
Yeah, it sounds like the foundation was education, and then as you went on with your career, things evolved. And what I often talk to people about when they describe a career like yours, not in terms of the content of what you did, but the way that you progressed. It was all networking, right? Somebody discovered you or saw how you worked and they invited you to join in another role. And it's not like you were, handing out resumes every step of the way or applying for jobs. It sounds like for the most part, people got to know you. They got to know the quality of your work and the quality of the way that you engaged with your students and with the people you worked with. And they said, you know what, we really need someone like you to help us in this role or in that role. And for the most part, I'm sure there may have been some shifts over time, but it sounds like for the most part, you moved from a school district into a university college setting. And then from there, you went into private industry. Is that right?
Well, the college teaching was in addition to the job. So I had the day job, and then I went to the night school. And taught there. So I was doing both at the same time.
I see.
I do have to think, though, that although I wasn't putting out my resume and looking for something, there were a couple of places, Tammy, where, I've been a school counselor for 10 years. I looked at the school system. I did not want to be a principal. I did not want to go to county office. And I saw no path forward for me. And I also had a salary schedule. Right. That if I was really good and you were really not so good, we were going to get paid the same amount of money. And I also, along about that time, had a second marriage that happened to a man who flew for Delta, who would say, well, can't you come to San Francisco with me on my trip? And I had this job, I had this 8 to 5 job. So I had a key place in life that I needed to be able to gain control of my time. I needed to get paid what I thought I deserved if I did really a great job. And I needed the creativity. And the school system was not going to give me a path to do that.
Right. And you knew what you wanted too, or at least you had a feeling for what you wanted.
I had a feeling that I knew what I wanted. But remember, I told you that I went to seminars where the Harvard educated person who is very good at what they do, getting paid very well for that 3-day seminar. And I just had to see where my skill level was.
Right.
And compare what could I teach seminars for businesses? Could I hold an audience for 3 days? Could I come out of that with A+ ratings and begin to build a reputation of you've got to get this woman into that kind of situation? And then I do have to tell you this one great story. So I'm progressing along out of the school system, teaching in businesses. And one of the things that I think I'm learning as I'm even telling this story is that when opportunities arise, like the guy chasing me down the hall saying, can you teach this class? And my initial no, I never said no again. Okay. I never said no again. So when the church came and they said, we would like you to read part of the scriptures for this, Christmas program or whatever it is, I said, sure, I'll do that. So now I'm standing on a Sunday morning in a church that I had visited, but I was not a member. And I'm reading the scriptures, and there are 450 people down below looking up at me. And I caught my breath and I said, oh my God, I want to keynote. Oh, it just like bowled me over. And so driving home, I'm right back to where I was. Okay, I'm good at this and I'm good at that. But that's a different skill level. That's a different 450 people in the audience, kind of, that sort of thing. So my humorous friends in the Georgia Speakers Association said, well, you're not funny. And I said, well, no, I'm not funny. But, and they said, well, you got to make them laugh. And I thought, well, this is not going to work for me because I'm not a humorist. I said, but I can tell a good story. So then my storytelling that was the skill I had to go after, was the storytelling to make the keynoting successful. So I hope that kind of fills in the spaces there.
Yeah, it does. It's very interesting how, different ways in which you discovered something about yourself that really led you to the next thing. So when was that? At what stage of your career did you decide to start keynoting?
That came, I can't remember the exact years, but I suppose I had been in organizations doing some of their training for maybe 7-8 years.
Okay.
Before I got the bug to get to keynote. And then when you're keynoting, then people are coming up to you and saying, well, where's your book? And of course I didn't have a book. And so I thought, well, how does this work? And I went to seminars, and some of my colleagues who had written books, they said, well, you just get up at 4:00 in the morning and you write from 4 to 7 and then you go to work. Well, that didn't work for me. I wasn't good at 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out a way of, okay, how am I in my life going to be able to do that piece? But I also have to add a piece here, and that is that people helped me along the way. Okay. People helped me along the way. And one of the things that I learned so well on that sailing trip was getting on the radio and asking for help. Could someone please come over? We have an engine that doesn't start. We need our oil change. And if you ask, people will help you.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And sometimes people even offer to help.
That's true. And I would give a presentation, and then one of my colleagues that I would put on alert, I would say, okay, I'm going to give this, and I want you to tell me the 2 or 3 things I did well and the 2 or 3 things that I could improve. I certainly didn't want a slew of things that I was doing wrong. That was going to demotivate me. Yeah. But what am I doing well? And what do I need to work on? So lots of help along the way. And in that college classroom that I was teaching at night, I had a video camera that I set up in the back of the room so that I could watch myself teaching that class. And I learned very early on that I was teaching to the right side of my class and not teaching to the left side of my class. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting. And what made you even decide to set up the camera?
Because I wanted to get better. I wanted to get better. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I had to understand, it's very hard to do a self-assessment when you don't have any data. Well, I needed that camera to give me some data.
I love that. I love that. So over the years, when you were teaching in companies, were you an employee or were you doing that as a contractor?
I was doing it as a contractor. And I also learned early on, now learning, I was also learning how to be in the business
Right.
of this. And what I learned was that I needed several revenue streams to make it work. So you can have or that would fit me. And remember I said I was looking for a place to be creative. So creative allowed me to, yes, I could do some coaching. Yes, I could teach some seminars. Yes, I could keynote, but I also had the opportunity to become a facilitator.
Aha.
So that was a different kind of skill level. Here we go again. And by that time, I had a very strong network. And I had people in my network who were great facilitators. And so I said, okay, what do I need to know? And many times, if I had an opportunity, I would get a piece of business and then bring them in as a co-facilitator, so that they could give me feedback on what I was doing. So they would do part of it. I got to watch them. They already knew what they were doing. And then when it was my turn, I would go to the back of the room and I say, okay, what should I do now?
Yeah.
So facilitation then opened up a whole new revenue stream for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's done purely on reputation.
Yeah.
Somebody finds out you're really good at facilitating meetings and it just off. So the different revenue streams were very important to me.
Yeah.
In terms of keeping that business afloat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And kind of not saying no, but not saying yes right off the bat until I did a really good assessment about, okay, if I'm going to do this, I want to be good at it. Because if you're not good at it, the word's going to get out. So don't go until you don't have to be great, but be good.
Well, and I can appreciate you wanting to partner with other people and having that balance, especially with another, person who has, more experience in facilitation. There's so much you can learn there. I definitely can share that sentiment, having done facilitation work myself, that it really helps to because it's a bit of a dance. There's not, just, it's not like a straight line trajectory. Here's what you do first and next and next. There's a lot of moving parts when you're facilitating.
There is a lot of moving parts.
Now, are you still today doing that blend of revenue streams of all those different things?
No, what happened was that we had the book, The Transparency Edge.
Yes.
And that was that was written with my daughter, who is a journalist and graduated from Vanderbilt. And I was out now working in leadership conferences and doing a lot of keynotes. And then I was also doing leadership coaching. And the facilitation was just starting to happen. But when she was working in the room and I was doing the keynote, that worked very, very well for us until Royal Caribbean Cruise Line called. And they said, we want both authors to speak. And my daughter said, I don't do that. She said, there is no way. And I went back to Royal Caribbean and I said, well, how about just I come in and speak? They said, no, we have our senior people in there and we have our mid-level managers and we want both authors. And so I went back to my daughter, and bottom line is, I said, Elizabeth, if you do this, this is how much money you will make. She looked at that and she said, all right, I can do this. So, totally inspired by the money. But I think that also she was ready to build her skills, that working the room and seeing where the next piece of business was going to come from was something that she was very good at and very safely ensconced in. And so we began a mother-daughter on the stage. She was the face of middle management. I was the face of senior. And that was a wonderful, that lasted for about 2.5 years. And that was just wonderful. Meanwhile, she went into leadership coaching. A friend of mine, she worked a lot with ride management, and it was a wonderful career until 9/11 hit. And when 9/11 hit and all of our calendars got kind of quiet, I had a boat that was coming out of refit. And I just said to my daughter, how would you like to get in this boat and see how far we could go? Because I think that you can remember, and many people can remember, we just didn't know when the calendars were going to come back, people were going to travel. And so that set off that experience of 6 months of traveling with an adult daughter. And she's my only child. So, she said yes. And that was the story of how that began.
I see. And tell us a little bit about that trip. Where did you go? And did you spend a lot of time planning ahead of where you would go and how that went?
Well, my husband and I had a boat in a 42-foot sailboat in the British Virgin Islands. And we had cruised. And when you cruise, that means you've dropped anchor at 3:00 in the afternoon. You've never sailed at night. I enjoyed that very much. So I was doing a great deal of good work, and there was money in the bank. So I brought the boat up, did a refit on her, not really knowing what was going to happen. But then 9/11 happened. I said to Elizabeth, do you want to go? The boat was coming out of refit. And I don't know whether it's a generational thing or what. I was willing to get in the boat and just see how far we could go. But my daughter said, she was in her, I guess, maybe mid-30s. I was in my late 50s. She said, Mom, I have to have a goal. She said, where are we going? And I said, well, here's the map. I said, just pick a place. And so I think she picked Grenada or someplace like that. But she needed the goal. I didn't need the goal. And so we just, we stocked the boat and read a lot of books and hired a retired Navy captain, put him on a boat for about 3 days in Pensacola Bay and said, okay, help us learn how to dock this boat, because we didn't know how to dock it. And basically, it goes back to what you and I talked about before. We said, we're going to try this.
Right.
And it became, for me, I was doing things that were pretty safe. I knew how to do them. Okay. I knew how to teach that course, or I knew how to coach that executive, but I didn't know if I could really do this. If I didn't go then I was going to regret that moment. So that was the reason to go.
And so it was clear that it was going to be, I mean, barring anything that you would have decided prior to that, it was clear that you were going to do it for 6 months?
No, we just set off, and we were going south. And, we learned to sail at night, which turned out to be the most wonderful experience I think I've ever had. And we had some scary experiences. We did not call a captain on the boat, because I didn't know any more about sailing it than she did. So, and the military people that we met along the way just were, they said, you can't do this. You have to have a captain. And we said, well, we don't. We just somebody just sort of figures it out, okay, as we go along. But if you're asking, did we know it was going to be 6 months? No, we didn't. But
okay.
I ran out of money. Because it costs money to do this.
Sure.
I ran out of money, and I had a business that needed tending to. So I needed to get back. So that's how that happened.
I see.
Yeah, but getting off the boat was one of the hardest things I had to do. Yeah. I did not want to get off. Did not want to get off.
And you and your daughter still talk today? Just kidding.
No, don't kid about that, because that was a big thing. Her friends came to her and they said, "You're going away with your mother? Are you out of your mind?" And then I had my friends saying, "You're going away with your daughter? Are you out of your mind?" But I have to tell you, now 24/7 with an adult child, how in the world would I have ever gotten that experience without being on a sailboat and trying to figure it out together? So that part of
it could have gone either way, right? I mean, it's just one of those things where even if you had a great relationship before, a trip like that can really test a relationship, wouldn't you say?
Well, I would say that in my daughter's journal, one of her entries was, "For the very first time in my life, my mother told me to shut up today." And it was a very loud shut up. The wind was roaring and we were in a very difficult situation. And she was like, I didn't want to hear what she had to say. And I very loudly shouted, at my wit's end, "Shut up." And she wrote in the journal, "And I did." Okay.
Well, if that's the worst thing that happened, you did very, very well.
We did well with that. That was good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, so you made it back, and take us forward from there.
Okay, that was, we had both been doing leadership coaching. We were coaching very successful people. They had been in coaching previously, and lots of times they just needed a different kind of experience to move their perspective on work and life.
Mm-hmm.
And we changed in that 6 months.
Oh, I bet.
Being away from work, just having that experience of thinking, lots of times to think when things aren't going awful. And so we came back and formed a company called yoursabbatical.com.
Ah, okay.
And told leaders that, no, you don't need another 360. You don't need another coaching session. What you need is a break. When you take an executive away from a company, somebody has to do that job.
Yeah.
So now you sit down with the executive and you say, "Okay, let's start piecing out your job." And the usual response was, "Well, nobody can really do my job." We're saying, "Well, let's try, And then you have these buckets, and then you have his team of people, and you have other people in the company looking at these things that they could learn to do while that executive is gone. Basically, it was a talent machine. And one of our CFOs said, "Look, that sabbatical for me was maybe 20% of the benefit of that sabbatical. 90% of the sabbatical was for the people left behind, because they learned new skills,
right,
and stepped up to the plate in a way that would never have happened if that executive had not been gone for 6 weeks."
And they say, whoever they is, they say that the sign of a good leader is when they do step away for a period of time, that the organization is able to run without them being there. So that company is still running now. Is that right?
No, it is not. However, okay. I still am getting calls and interviews about it. But when that that was hard work to sell to companies, because it's an extra added benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter simply came to me and she said, "Mom, there was not enough money to support 2 people."
I see.
And so it was just a situation of purely financial. I had a young daughter and she said, "I need to go make some real money, Mom."
Yeah.
And so she left, and I had it over here to run, but also I now was approaching mid-60s and getting where everybody is, where they're saying, "Okay, now what's going on with me? Do I want to do that by myself? Do I want to go back to leadership coaching?" So that was kind of a pivot place.
Yeah. So what was that like for you, that pivot place?
So I began to study longevity understand that, whoa, I had a whole lifetime ahead of me. So let's invest now in something that will carry me forward 25 years. And then I also had the data from the research about the big regret at the end of life when people say, and it's very well documented, after 60 years, the big regret is still the same. And that is, I wish I had lived my life truer to myself. So I had to figure out, and all my friends were saying, Barbara, you've had a very good life. What you need to do now is you need to volunteer and make the world a better place. Well, I had been volunteering and I had been making the world a better place. And it just, I had a lot of work to do. So I got lost and I became a student again. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? And how am I going to move this forward? And I didn't want to go backwards, Tammy. I didn't want to go back to leadership coaching. I had this. And the only thing that I could think of was, if I got lost, there are other people out there who are getting lost.
Right.
So I went back to all those executives that I had coached in those senior positions who had retired. And I said, so how's that going for you? And they said, not good, Barbara. I wish I had done a better job of thinking about a whole other third of my life. And I did not. I shut the door, had the retirement party, packed my bag, traveled for 2 years, and then sat down and said, what am I supposed to do now? So I knew there were other people out there who could benefit from my experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds like that period of you feeling lost was relatively brief, that you, in a way, you translated that into a period of research.
I did.
At least there was a purposefulness even in the research, even if you weren't sure exactly where it was taking you.
But Tammy, it was just it was just sitting every morning with a cup of coffee, looking out at water, thinking, what am I going to do? I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I had a very good friend who called and said, so what's going on? And I said, I'm percolating some ideas. And she said, Barbara, you've been percolating for a long time.
Oh, wow. Mm.
You have good friends that'll do that for you?
Yep. You betcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you're right. So then I looked at, okay, do I want to go teach English? Here's that teaching thing coming along. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to live in other cultures. That kind of excites me. Can I go to Chile and teach English to senior executives? I'm a really good facilitator. Maybe I could, work in some area of mediation. And I figured out that if I wanted to do that, then I'd have to go to Harvard and spend $10,000 and get a certificate, but that's okay. Then that's what I have to do. But that was going to make me a great mediator in a certain part of the country. And how did that fit with wanting to live in third world countries? And then the teaching English to senior executives, that position came through, but they wanted me to get on a bus every night at 5:00 and travel different parts of Santiago or wherever it was. And I said, I can't do that. That's not going to work for me.
Right.
And so then it just became back to, let me put this book together. Let me go back to teaching people some skills that they might need to learn, and some awareness that I learned along the way. So, but it was a getting lost place for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. It sounds like it was a painful process for you in some ways, and yet you were getting answers too.
I was getting answers, and I would have to say, I would want your listeners to know that I wasn't depressed. I was confused. I was confused about what was ahead. And I found out that old models of education, work, retirement were not going to be good models for me to follow. Well, my parents did that. Who's doing this differently? And then you have to go out and find the experts who are saying, no, this is a new way to look because you have 30 years. And then I had to own that 30 years. I had to say, okay, that's my 30 years. That's not, just how it's reading something in a book. These are my 30 years. And will I have them? I don't know. But I should try to live as if I have them.
Absolutely.
And then what's truer to myself? What do I want to do with my life?
Right.
And we all have responsibilities, and I honor responsibilities, whether it's a marriage or kids or whatever it is.
Right.
But what do I want to do?
Right.
So,
yeah. So that's where the book started to also formulate, right?
Yeah, I started to learn things and I started to write them down, and I started blogging. And and writing was a way for me to make sense of what I was experiencing, which you will hear a lot of writers say. When I write it down and look at it, then that makes sense to me about what I'm living through. And I kept learning these little pieces about longevity and well-being. I just needed to understand that, I had potential, and I had a balloon that was maybe half filled, and I needed to work very hard on filling the rest.
Well, I know you have. And I know that that balloon is still very high up in the air, floating around.
It is. Experts say, though, that you need to bust it. So, I don't think, but I do want to get, the story I tell is that I want to get to the end of my 90 years, my 100 years, which is very possible.
Absolutely.
For us now.
Yeah.
And to get there healthy, and to get there with our minds intact, even though we have so much around us and other people's stories, it's not our story. But I want to get to the end and look back and say, well done, Barbara. Just well done.
Right.
So that's where I'm headed.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think most of us would like to feel, not to have that regret, but not just to spend your life saying, I don't want to feel regret, but I want to feel a sense of peace, a sense of groundedness within myself, that I lived the best life that I could, whatever that was. And I wanted to turn to your book, The 60-Something Crisis, How to Live an Extraordinary Life in Retirement. I think the book also, though, really gives you guidelines for living an extraordinary life, whether you're retired or just a working person. I think that there's a lot of guidelines in this book and a lot of ways of looking at life that could serve. And you told me this earlier. There are people in their 50s who are saying, why this book's good for people younger than 60, right?
It's very eye-opening.
Yes.
And heartwarming for me to have had the experience of an audience 23 to 32 who want to hear how to live an extraordinary life. And that's not my usual audience.
Right. Okay.
And so I double checked and I said, this is what I talk about. We want to learn about how to live an extraordinary life. Now, not in retirement, but they just wanted the pieces.
That's right.
And then you have a young man over in the corner calling his mother and saying, hey, Mom, I need to talk to you. Are you leading an extraordinary life? So the 60-something, I think I've learned that there's a lot of, we just need to be reminded of very, very important things. And in the age of longevity, we're all new to this.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not even a reminder for some people. I think it's an introduction, because I think that some people have, gone through their lives with, just a set of expectations about how things should be or need to be. And and have not allowed themselves to look beyond those parameters. So this is eye-opening for people. I love the question that you ask. What happens when you don't give life your best shot?
Mm-hmm. That
You know?
That haunted me. Okay. There are things that haunt me, and the big regret haunts me. And what happens if you don't give it your best shot?
Right.
And that's a decision that all of us make for at different times in our lives. And it's an important, take a chance, see what you can do.
Yeah. And I think some people will do that and others just don't believe in themselves enough, or they think they don't have choices.
Well, I think that we sometimes have more choices than we think that we do.
I agree.
I think that we can create choices sometimes. I mean, sometimes people look at me and say, well, exactly how did you go off and live for 3 months in all those different countries? Well, please note that I wasn't going to London and I wasn't going to Paris because my pocketbook will not support living very well in those kinds of cities.
Right.
But I could go to Central and South America within my budget and have experiences. So, yeah, I had choices within my parameter of what was, available to me.
Right. And that's what I love about your book, though. It gives the reader a lot of different ways to look in the mirror and ask themselves compelling questions in a lot of different contexts so that they can start, or at least begin to see what kinds of choices they might want to make if they haven't considered them before.
Well, I love that you're saying that because I have been told that it is a thinking book. Mm-hmm. It is not prescriptive.
Not at all. Not at all.
It's not step 1, step 2, step 3. And it's not necessarily what people have heard. I'm not purpose didn't work for me. Passion didn't work for me. But what do I need to know worked for me?
Right.
What do I need to know?
Right. Like I loved in chapter 4, redefining work in retirement.
Someone just told me a story last night at a book celebration of a man who loved to play golf. And his financial advisor, the country club just wasn't working into the amount of money that was available. And yet this was a man who really, really wanted to play golf. Well, he now is teaching golf at one of the other, and he called his financial advisors and said, okay, I made it work. So he's created not a revenue. Well, he is getting paid for it, but he is also getting free golf, which is what he wanted to do. So people are doing it in very, very different ways, but we can't come down on ourselves, Tammy, because we are pioneers. This is never happened before that we have the gift of 30 years and the old models don't fit anymore. And the word retirement is not going to go away in your lifetime or my lifetime. So we do have to keep the word, but just make it explode in the way that it works for you.
Right. So what would you say? You're saying there are people in their 20s who are enjoying listening to you speak. So would you say that people, long before they're looking towards this fourth part of their life, should be reading your book?
I think the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. I would too.
I think they can look and understand that they can have 2 careers. They can have 3 careers. Mm-hmm. They can maybe modify a career. They are going to need revenue streams if you're going to live 100 years. Your financial people will say there is no 40-year career that is going to fund a 40-year retirement. So that becomes what work. I don't think you have to love the work that you do, but I think you have to like it well enough that you can make it fit in your life, and what kind of revenue do you need? So I think that people in their 20s and 30s can not only look at careers, plural, but I also think that they can take maybe a longer look and say, okay, maybe I don't drop out at 65 and go for the leisure. Maybe I work time off or sabbaticals into my life in between jobs. Or we have people who went to their companies who were valued employees and said, I want to take 3 months off. And we helped them design a good reason to do that, how they were going to be better employees and then come back to the company with new skills. And the company said yes. So maybe a 20 and 30-year-old is looking at time out from work. If you're going to work until you're 80 or 90, then maybe you take places where you take a year off or you take 6 weeks off or whatever. So you can design your life differently.
I think that's the key. I think that designing your life is key here in many, many ways. And of course, as we age, there are different things that we're going to want to do in different ways, depending on just what our general health status is and how we're doing. But I interviewed somebody else on this podcast who started taking sabbaticals much earlier on in his career. And it's really changed the shape and form of his life. And it didn't harm his business. He's self-employed.
Right.
I think there's only good reasons to just take a break from what you're doing day to day and think about what you want next.
Absolutely.
So there's so many good reasons for people to get their hands on your book.
Well, thank you.
How can people, what's the best way for people to find you today?
Well, I am active at Your Extraordinary Life or Your Extraordinary Life in Retirement or the 60-something crisis. I think they can get to the website on all those, which is a lot of really good information, especially when we talk about the 4 portals and what you need to investigate in 4 different areas as you go forward.
So we will have all that in the show notes so that people can find you and reach out to you. I have one final question for you. So knowing that a lot of people who listen are thinking about what's next for them, what would be a key piece of advice that you might give someone who is considering a transition of some type?
When they look at that transition, I want them to verbalize what they think they want. And then I want them to go one step beyond and say, wow, what it might look like if I do that and that, that other little piece. So I have learned more about myself when I have done something that I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it. And when you get to that place, then you start learning the skills that you need to learn.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You are putting stories out there of real people who are doing real things. And, post book, I'm right back looking at what my next hard thing is. So I'm not doing anything that I'm not advertising other people to do. Post book, then you have to figure out, okay, what's my next hard thing?
All right. Well, I'm going to be watching and seeing what that is. I'm excited for you.
You're delightful. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate your being here. Thank you so much, Barbara. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Barbara Pagano. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her career journey and how that's evolved into her current interests. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you're interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 205. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Barbara, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd be so appreciative of getting your review on Apple Podcasts. You can find that also through my website, tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, I would always appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Please let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.